Her team abandoned her in enemy territory. She saved them all. Anyway, in 48 hours. What would you do if your entire team turned their backs on you in the middle of enemy territory? If the people you trusted most left you to die in a blizzard with hostiles hunting you? This female Navy SEAL faced exactly that. But what happened next will restore your faith in true leadership. If you believe real strength means protecting even those who betray you, hit that subscribe button now. Because this story proves that honor isn't about being right. It's about doing right. The wind screamed across the Cascade Mountains like the ghosts of every soldier who died in these peaks. Lieutenant Commander Diana Sterling pressed herself against the frozen rock face, ice crystals forming on her eyelashes with each breath. The temperature gauge on her wrist read -15 Fahrenheit, but with the wind chill it felt like -40. Below her, 7 figures moved through the snow. Her team. SEAL Team 3 Mountain Warfare Unit, the men she'd trained with for 3 years. The men who 30 minutes ago had looked her in the eye and refused her direct order. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Barnes had been the one to say it. 6'4" of Philadelphia muscle and attitude, he'd stood in the command tent with snow still melting on his shoulders and delivered the words like a slap. "Go back to base, ma'am. We're not dying for your redemption story." Then they'd left. All 7 of them. Walking out into the blizzard without her heading back to base, leaving her alone with the mission and the guilt and the weight of a decision she'd made 5 years ago that still woke her up at 3 a.m., sheets soaked with sweat and regret. Diana watched them disappear into the white void, their heat signatures fading on her thermal scope. Part of her wanted to follow, to accept the failure to prove Barnes right. But then she remembered the mission briefing. 3 scientists, specialists in bioweapons defense, crashed somewhere in these mountains. The intelligence was clear. Russian mercenaries were also searching for the MHM. Whoever found them first would control research that could save or end millions of lives. Her satellite phone buzzed. General Morrison, watching from some warm office in D.C. "Sterling, what's your status?" Diana considered her words carefully. "Team has returned to base, sir. Equipment malfunction." "All of them?" "All of them, sir." Silence on the line. "Then you're proceeding alone." "Someone has to, General." "Diana, that's suicide. The storm's getting worse. We're reading 60-knot winds at altitude." She looked up at the mountain peaks disappearing into clouds black as gunpowder. "Then I better move fast, sir." "I'm ordering you to return to base, Commander." "I'm sorry, sir. You're breaking up. Must be the storm." She turned off the satellite phone before he could respond. Court-martial of offense, probably. But court-martials were for people who survived. Diana secured her gear, checking each piece with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through 43 operations in places the American public would never know existed. The MK-18 rifle across her chest, 2 spare magazines, emergency medical kit, climbing gear, and enough MREs for 72 hours if she was careful. It would have to be enough. She started climbing. The mountain didn't care that she was alone. It didn't care that she was a woman in a world that still whispered about whether women belonged in combat. It only cared about physics, the coefficient of friction between her boots and ice, the tensile strength of her climbing rope, the rate at which human bodies lost heat at altitude. 3 hours into the climb, Diana found the first evidence of the crash. Scattered debris, aluminum fragments embedded in pine trees like shrapnel. She was on the right path. But the debris pattern was wrong. This wasn't consistent with a crash. It was consistent with a missile strike. Someone had shot down the scientist's plane. She keyed her emergency beacon, sending a coded burst transmission back to base. They needed to know this wasn't an accident. This was an act of war. The storm intensified as she climbed higher. Visibility dropped to less than 10 meters. Diana navigated by instinct and GPS, each step a calculated risk. One wrong move and she'd fall into a crevasse. Her body wouldn't be found until spring, if ever. That's when she heard it. A voice barely audible above the wind. Female. Young. Speaking English with a slight accent. Diana followed the sound, her rifle ready. In a shallow ice cave, barely more than a depression in the rock face, she found her. Dr. Catherine Chen, 29 years old according to the briefing, one of the most brilliant virologists in America. Her right leg was twisted at an impossible angle, bone visible through torn fabric. Her face was pale as the snow around her lips blew with hypothermia. "Don't shoot," Catherine whispered, raising one trembling hand. "Please." Diana lowered her weapon, moving quickly to assess the injury. Compound fracture of the tibia, severe blood loss, early stages of hypothermia. Without immediate treatment, Catherine would be dead within hours. I'm Lieutenant Commander Sterling, U.S. Navy, Diana said, already pulling medical supplies from her pack. I'm here to get you out. Catherine's eyes focused with difficulty. The others, Mitchell and Park, they're dead. The Russians, they shot us down. Diana worked quickly, setting the bone as gently as possible. Catherine screamed, the sound swallowed by the storm. How long ago? Diana asked, injecting morphine. Yesterday. Maybe 2 days. I can't. Catherine's voice trailed off. Consciousness fading. Stay with me, doctor. Diana wrapped Catherine in her emergency blanket, sharing her own body heat. Tell me about the research. What were you carrying? Catherine's eyes snapped back into focus, suddenly alert despite the drugs. You don't understand. It's not what we were carrying. It's what we discovered. The virus, it's already out there. Accidentally released from a U.S. facility 6 months ago. We developed the only vaccine. Diana's blood turned colder than the mountain air. What virus? Chimera 7, weaponized hemorrhagic fever crossed with influenza transmission vectors. 90% mortality rate if it gets into the general population. The vaccine data is in my pack, but what? The Russians don't want to steal it. They want to destroy it. They have their own vaccine. If ours is eliminated, they control who lives and dies in the coming pandemic. Diana processed this, her mind racing through implications. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. This was about preventing biological genocide. Can you travel? Diana asked. Catherine tried to stand, collapsed immediately. I can't walk. Leave me. Take the data and go. Not happening. Diana began fashioning a travois from climbing rope and branches. I don't leave people behind. Even when they leave you, Diana looked up sharply. Catherine was staring at her with those intelligent eyes, seeing more than she should. I heard the radio chatter earlier, Catherine admitted. Your team abandoned you. Why? Diana continued, working on the travois, not meeting Catherine's gaze. It's complicated. We might die out here. Complicated stories are all we have. Diana sighed, the weight of 5 years pressing down. Operation Sandstorm, Syria, 2019. I was team leader. Intelligence said a high-value target was in a compound. We went in hard and fast, but the intelligence was wrong. It was a family, parents and 3 children. In the confusion in the dark, my team opened fire. What did you do? I called for ceasefire, but it was too late. The parents were dead. 2 of the children were dead. The youngest, a boy, maybe 5 years old, was still breathing. I tried to save him, but we were taking fire from actual hostiles. I had to make a choice: stay and try to save the boy or extract my team. Catherine waited, patient as death. I chose my team, Diana continued. The boy died in my arms as we ran for the helicopters. Command called it a righteous shoot, said the family was harboring terrorists. But I knew better. They were just people in the wrong place. And I chose my team over an innocent child. You chose the living over the dying, Catherine said quietly. That's not evil. That's mathematics. Mathematics? Diana laughed bitterly. Tell that to Barnes. His younger brother was one of my shooters that night, killed himself 6 months later. Barnes blames me for not preventing the engagement, then blames me for choosing the team over the child. In his mind, both decisions were wrong. So he left you to die on this mountain. He left me to make another impossible choice without his life in my hands. Diana finished the travois, testing its strength. It would hold barely. We need to move, she said. Can you handle the pain? Catherine nodded. I've handled worse. Diana doubted that, but didn't argue. She secured Catherine to the travois and began the brutal work of dragging another human being through deep snow. Every step was agony, her muscles screaming, lungs burning in the thin air. But she kept moving, always moving, because movement was life and stillness was death. 4 hours later, as the last gray light faded from the sky, Diana heard them. Voices speaking Russian maybe 300 meters ahead. She stopped, lowering Catherine behind a fallen tree. How many? Catherine whispered. Diana listened carefully. 6, maybe 7. Professional pattern. They're sweeping for us. You can't fight 7 men. Not in a straight fight. Diana pulled out her tactical scanner, watching the heat signatures move through the forest. They were disciplined, maintaining spacing, checking corners. Definitely Spetsnaz or equivalent, but discipline could be a weakness if you knew how to exploit it. Diana pulled 2 grenades from her vest. Not fragmentation. Those would kill, and despite everything, she wasn't ready to cross that line. These were flashbangs modified with her own mixture of magnesium and aluminum powder. They'd blind and disorient without permanent damage. When I move count to 30, then scream, Diana told Catherine. What? Trust me. Diana circled wide using the storm as cover. The Russians were focused on the obvious approach paths, the routes a normal person would take. But Diana had spent 5 years in these mountains training for exactly this scenario. She knew every game trail, every hidden ravine. She positioned herself above them on a ridge, watching their heat signatures converge on Catherine's position. Right on schedule, Catherine screamed. The Russians rushed forward, weapons raised expecting easy prey. Diana dropped both flashbangs into their midst. The explosion was devastating in the darkness. 7 men temporarily blind, stumbling, firing at shadows. Diana was already moving not toward them but past them, dragging Catherine on the travois, using their confusion to gain distance. But one of the Russians recovered faster than the others. His shot was wild but lucky, catching Diana in the left shoulder. She felt the impact like a sledgehammer, spinning her around, dropping her to one knee. Catherine saw the blood immediately. You're hit. It's nothing. Diana forced herself up, adrenaline overriding pain. We keep moving. They pushed deeper into the forest, Diana leaving a blood trail that would be invisible in the darkness, but obvious come dawn. Behind them, she could hear the Russians reorganizing, angry voices cutting through the wind. There, Catherine pointed ahead. Is that a structure? Through the snow, Diana could make out the shape of a building. She recognized it from old military maps. An abandoned radar station from the Cold War, one of dozens scattered through these mountains. They reached it just as Diana's strength began to fail. The door was frozen shut, but desperation gave her the strength to force it open. Inside, the darkness was absolute, but at least they were out of the wind. Diana collapsed against the wall, her hand coming away red from her shoulder. The bullet had gone through, which was good, but she was losing blood fast. Let me, Catherine said, pulling herself up despite her broken leg. Her hands were steady as she examined the wound. I need your medical kit. Diana handed it over, watching Catherine work with surprising skill. You're not just a virologist, Diana observed. I was a combat medic before I got my doctorate. Brothers unit in Afghanistan. I know gunshot wounds. Small world, Diana thought. Everyone connected by war and loss. Catherine finished bandaging the wound. You'll live, but you need real medical attention within 24 hours, or infection will set in. 24 hours. Diana looked out the broken window at the storm. The Russians will find us by dawn. My team is gone, and we're 15 miles from the nearest extraction point. So we die here. Diana stood testing her shoulder. Pain shot through her arm, but she could still move it. No, we complete the mission. That vaccine data gets back to base even if we don't. She pulled out her satellite phone, surprised to see she had a weak signal, 1 bar fluctuating. She dialed the emergency frequency. Base, this is Sterling. Package secured. Requesting immediate extraction. Grid reference. The line went dead, but she'd gotten the essential information out. Now she just had to keep them alive long enough for help to arrive. If help came at all. Dawn came like a whisper through the broken windows of the radar station, gray light revealing a world buried in white. Diana had been awake for the past 4 hours, watching the Russian heat signatures on her scope as they methodically searched the forest below. They had found her blood trail an hour ago. It was only a matter of time now. Catherine stirred on the makeshift bed Diana had constructed from old insulation and emergency blankets. The morphine was wearing off, and Diana could see pain carving lines into the young scientist's face. How long? Catherine asked, reading Diana's expression. Maybe 30 minutes before they find us. Catherine pulled herself up, gritting her teeth against the pain. The vaccine data. We need to transmit it. How my satellite phone is dead, and this place hasn't had power since 1991. Catherine smiled despite everything. I'm not just a virologist or a combat medic. MIT class of 2015, dual major in biochemistry and electrical engineering. She pulled a small device from her pack, something that looked like a modified tablet. Satellite transmitter, solar-powered. I designed it for fieldwork in places without infrastructure. Diana felt a spark of hope. Can it handle the data package? It'll take time, maybe 20 minutes to compress and transmit everything. Can you give me 20 minutes? Diana checked her ammunition. 2 magazines for the MK-18, one for her sidearm. Against 7 Spetsnaz operators, it might as well be nothing. But she'd faced impossible odds before. I'll give you 20 minutes, Diana said. Start transmitting. She moved to the window, studying the approaches to the station. The Russians would come from the east using the tree line as cover. Standard doctrine. But knowing their approach didn't make stopping them any easier. That's when she saw something that changed everything. A heat signature separate from the Russians moving parallel to their formation. Someone was following them. Someone they didn't know was there. Diana adjusted her scope, trying to get a clearer view. The figure moved with trained precision, maintaining perfect spacing, using the Russians' own noise to mask their approach. Military trained, definitely. But her answer came via a burst transmission on her emergency frequency. 3 words: Frost, providing overwatch. Sergeant Tommy Anderson, 28 years old, the youngest member of her team. The only one who'd argued against abandoning her. Barnes had overruled him, but apparently Frost had decided to come back anyway. Diana keyed her mic twice, acknowledging. 1 ally against 7 enemies. The odds were getting better, but still far from good. Diana, Catherine called softly, I need to tell you something about my brother. Now. If we don't make it, someone needs to know. Catherine's fingers flew over her tablet, not looking up. He was CIA operative Michael Chen, died 5 years ago in Syria. Diana's blood turned to ice. Michael Chen, the CIA operative she'd been ordered to extract from Sandstorm. The one she'd chosen to leave behind when she extracted her team instead of staying for the child. You knew, Diana said. It wasn't a question. I've known who you were since the moment you said your name, Catherine admitted. I've studied everything about that night, every report, every witness statement. And you still trusted me to save you. Because I also know what the reports don't say. Michael was already dead when you made that choice. Shot by a sniper in 3 minutes before your team arrived. The child you tried to save, that was the sniper's son. Michael had killed his father in self-defense, and the boy was being used as bait. Diana stared at Catherine. How could you know that? Because Michael transmitted everything back to CIA headquarters before he died. It's all classified beyond classification, but when your sister is Catherine Chen, winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, doors open, truths get revealed. Then Barnes doesn't know, can't know. The truth about that night would destroy too many ongoing operations. But Diana, you need to understand something. You didn't fail anyone that night. You were set up to fail by intelligence agencies playing games with soldiers' lives. Before Diana could respond, Frost's voice crackled through her earpiece. Contact. 7 operators approaching your position. 2 minutes. Diana pushed the emotional revelations aside. Process later. Survive now. Catherine, how much longer? 15 minutes. The encryption is complex. Keep working. Diana moved to the door, checking her rifle one more time. The plan forming in her mind was insane, but insane had worked so far. She keyed her mic. Frost, on my signal, I need you to put rounds into the trees above their position. Not at them, above them. Make it sound like there's a full squad up here. Copy. Diana watched the Russians approach their formation, perfect weapons, sweeping for targets. The lead operator was massive, probably 6'5", moving with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. Behind him, 6 more ghosts in white camouflage, invisible, except for her thermal scope. Wait, Diana told herself. Wait. They were 50 meters away, 40, 30. Now, Diana whispered. Frost opened fire from their flank, his rounds shredding tree branches above the Russians' heads. They reacted instantly, diving for cover, returning fire at what they thought was a squad-size element. Diana burst from the station's door, not retreating, but charging straight at them. It was the last thing they expected. She covered the distance in seconds, her rifle spitting controlled bursts, not trying to kill, just to suppress, to confuse. She reached the first Russian before he could react, her rifle butt connecting with his jaw. He dropped unconscious. She grabbed his weapon now, dual-wielding, laying down a wall of fire that forced the others to stay in cover. But it couldn't last. One of the Russians, smarter than the others, realized she was alone. He broke cover, flanking her. Diana saw him coming, tried to adjust, but her wounded shoulder betrayed her. The rifle slipped. The Russian shot would have killed her, but Frost was there, his own shot catching the Russian in the vest, dropping him with non-lethal but devastating force. Sterling, Frost was beside her now, pulling her to cover. "What the hell were you thinking?" "Buying time," Diana gasped, her shoulder screaming. "Catherine needs 10 more minutes." "We don't have 10 minutes. The Russians were reorganizing, their leader barking orders in accented English. They knew they were only facing two opponents now. The math was in their favor. That's when Diana heard engines. Multiple vehicles approaching, fast. Her heart sank. Reinforcements. They were finished, but the vehicles that burst into the clearing weren't Russian. They were American Humvees, and Barnes was in the lead vehicle's turret manning the 50 caliber machine gun. "Everybody freeze!" Barnes's voice boomed across the clearing. "Weapons down or we open fire." The Russians, caught between Diana's position and three Humvees full of Navy SEALs, had no choice. They lowered their weapons, hands rising in surrender. Barnes dismounted, his face unreadable behind tactical goggles. He walked past the Russians like they didn't exist, stopping in front of Diana. "Commander," he said formally, "you disobeyed a direct order to return to base." "You disobeyed a direct order to support your commanding officer," Diana countered. They stared at each other, 5 years of anger and guilt and misunderstanding hanging between them like a blade. Then Barnes did something Diana never expected. He saluted. "I was wrong, ma'am. Frost told us about the scientist, about what she's carrying. This isn't about redemption. It's about the mission. It was always about the mission." "Chief Barnes, my brother made his choice that night in Syria." Barnes continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He pulled the trigger. He has to live with that. I've been blaming you because it was easier than blaming him. That ends now." Diana felt something break inside her chest, 5 years of carried weight suddenly lifting. "Chief, your brother was following my orders." "No, ma'am, he was following his conscience. Just like you were. Just like you are now." "Commander," Catherine's voice from the station. "Transmission complete. The vaccine data is secure." Barnes smiled, the first real smile Diana had seen from him in years. "Mission accomplished, Commander. Now let's get the hell off this mountain." They loaded Catherine into one of the Humvees, Diana finally allowing the medic to properly treat her shoulder. The Russians were secured, awaiting pickup by federal authorities. International incident, probably, but that was someone else's problem. As they drove down the mountain, Catherine reached over and took Diana's hand. "You asked why I trusted you," she said quietly. "It wasn't because of what I knew about that night. It was because when your team abandoned you, when you had every reason to abandon me, you didn't. You stayed, you fought, you bled for someone you'd never met." "It's the job," Diana said simply. "No," Catherine squeezed her hand. "It's who you are." The convoy stopped suddenly. Diana looked up to see the road blocked by a single figure. A man in Russian winter camouflage, hands raised but clearly military. Barnes had his weapon up instantly, but Diana recognized the stance, the bearing. "Wait," she called. "I know him." Captain Nikolai Volkov of the Spetsnaz stepped forward, older than the intelligence photos suggested, his face weathered by too many winters in too many wars. "Commander Sterling," he said in accented but clear English, "we need to talk." "Your men attacked us," Diana said, stepping out of the Humvee despite the medic's protests. "My men followed orders, but I am here to tell you those orders came from someone in your government, not mine." Diana felt the world tilt. "What?" Volkov pulled out a phone, showing her a message thread. "Admiral Cooper, your Pacific Fleet commander. He paid us to eliminate the scientists and frame it as a Russian operation. He owns stock in the pharmaceutical company that has the inferior vaccine. If your scientist's vaccine is destroyed, his investment increases by approximately $500 million. You have proof. I have recordings, transfers, everything. My government wants no part of this. Biological weapons are a line even we won't cross. But Admiral Cooper, he would watch millions die for profit." Diana took the phone, scrolling through the evidence. It was damning, undeniable. "Why give this to me?" Volkov smiled sadly. Because 20 years ago, a young American lieutenant saved my family from a fire in Bosnia. She didn't know we were Russian, didn't care. She just saw people who needed help. That lieutenant grew up to become Admiral Patricia Sterling, your mother." Diana's legs nearly gave out. Her mother had died 10 years ago, cancer taking her before she could see Diana graduate buds. She never mentioned, "Of course not. It would have complicated both our careers, but I owe her a debt. Today I repay it." Volkov turned to go, then paused. "Your scientist, Dr. Chen, tell her the vaccine works. We tested it on volunteers. It's effective. She saved the world, Commander." "You both did." He disappeared into the forest, leaving Diana standing in the snow with evidence that would destroy an admiral and save millions of lives. Barnes appeared beside her. "Ma'am," Diana looked at the phone in her hand, then at Catherine in the Humvee at Frost standing overwatch at the team that had abandoned and then saved her. "We're not done, Chief," she said. "The mission just got bigger." "Orders, ma'am." For the first time in 5 years, Diana smiled. "We're going to finish what we started. We're going to deliver the vaccine data, expose Admiral Cooper, and save lives, all of them. No one gets left behind this time." "Hoorah," Barnes said quietly. "Hoorah," the team echoed. As they drove down the mountain, Diana thought about choices and consequences, about water finding its way through stone, about truth being stronger than lies. 48 hours ago, her team had abandoned her in a blizzard. Now they were united in purpose, carrying salvation in the form of data and truth in the form of evidence. Sometimes Diana realized you have to go through hell before you can lead others to heaven. The conference room at Joint Base Lewis McChord had never felt smaller. Diana sat at one end of the polished table, her left arm in a sling, surrounded by uniforms with enough stars to light up the night sky. Admiral Cooper sat at the other end, his weathered face showing nothing but paternal concern. "Commander Sterling," Cooper began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "First, let me commend you on a successful mission. Dr. Chen's vaccine data has been secured, and the Russian mercenaries have been detained." "Thank you, sir," Diana replied, her voice carefully neutral. "However," Cooper continued, "there are concerns about your methods. Operating alone after your team returned to base, engaging hostile forces without backup. Some might call it reckless." Barnes shifted beside her, but Diana touched his arm slightly. "Wait. I did what was necessary, Admiral," Diana said. "Necessary." Cooper leaned back. "That's an interesting word, Commander. Was it necessary to make contact with Captain Volkov of the Spetsnaz?" There it was. Cooper knew about the meeting, which meant he was either testing her or preparing to discredit her. "Captain Volkov approached us, sir. I felt it prudent to gather intelligence." "And what intelligence did you gather?" Diana reached into her pocket, pulling out a flash drive. The room tensed, hands moving subtly towards sidearms. She placed it carefully on the table. "Evidence, Admiral, that someone in the U.S. military conspired with foreign mercenaries to assassinate American scientists." Cooper's face didn't change, but Diana saw his pupils dilate slightly. Fear response. "That's a serious accusation, Commander." "Yes, sir, it is." General Patterson, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "What kind of evidence?" Diana looked directly at Cooper as she answered. "Financial transfers, encrypted communications, voice recordings, all linking Admiral Cooper to the mercenary attack." The room exploded, officers shouting accusations, flying, Cooper rising to his feet with indignation painted across his face. "This is absurd," Cooper roared. "Commander Sterling has clearly been compromised. Stress isolation, that shoulder wound." "The evidence speaks for itself," Diana interrupted. "General Patterson, I request that data be reviewed by an independent panel." "You're delusional," Cooper said. "That data is obviously fabricated. Russian disinformation." "Then you won't mind if we verify it?" Patterson asked, studying Cooper with new suspicion. Cooper's jaw worked. "Of course not, but I want it on record that Commander Sterling operated outside parameters, made contact with enemy agents, and is now presenting suspicious intelligence that could damage national security." "Noted," Patterson said. He reached for the flash drive. That's when Catherine Chen entered the room. She was in a wheelchair, her leg in a cast, but her eyes were sharp as surgical steel. Behind her, Frost pushed the chair, and behind him, someone Diana didn't expect, Director James Harrison of the CDC. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, I apologize for interrupting, but there's something you need to know. Cooper's face had gone pale. Director Harrison, this is a classified military briefing about a biological weapon that falls under CDC jurisdiction. Harrison continued. Dr. Chen has briefed me fully. The Chimera 7 virus is already in the wild. We have confirmed cases in Seattle, Los Angeles, and Miami. Without Dr. Chen's vaccine, we're looking at a pandemic that will make COVID look like a head cold. The room went silent. Furthermore, Harrison continued, we've traced the virus's release to a laboratory in Maryland, a laboratory that received funding from a shell company owned by Admiral Cooper. Cooper stood slowly. You can't prove. Actually, we can tell you. Catherine spoke for the first time. You see, Admiral, when you paid the mercenaries to kill us, you made one mistake. You didn't know I'd already uploaded the vaccine data to a secure cloud server. But more importantly, you didn't know I'd been investigating the virus's origin for months. She pulled out her tablet, fingers dancing across the screen. The room's main display lit up with financial documents, laboratory records, shipping manifests. 6 months ago, Catherine continued, Admiral Cooper's company received samples of Chimera 7 from the Maryland lab, ostensibly for research into countermeasures. But what actually happened was industrial espionage. Cooper was trying to reverse engineer the virus to sell to the highest bidder. The accidental release, Diana asked. Not accidental, Catherine said. Cooper released it deliberately in small quantities to create demand for the vaccine his company was developing. But the virus mutated faster than expected. It got out of control. Cooper was backing toward the door, but Barnes and Frost were already there blocking his exit. When our team developed a better vaccine, Catherine continued, one that actually worked unlike his company's inferior product, Cooper couldn't let it reach the public. So he hired the Russians to kill us and destroy our research. Lies, Cooper said, but his voice was weak. Well, lies. Then explain this, Diana said, pulling out her phone. She played a recording, Volkov's voice clear in the silent room. Admiral Cooper, the scientists have been located, awaiting your confirmation for termination. The agreed price was $5 million transferred to the Cayman account. Cooper's recorded voice responded, confirmed, eliminate all three. Make it look like an accident. The vaccine data must be destroyed. The recording ended. Cooper stood frozen trapped between truth and consequence. Admiral James Cooper, General Patterson said formally, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and crimes against humanity. Military police entered the room, cuffs ready. Cooper looked at Diana, hatred burning in his eyes. You think you've won, he snarled. You have no idea how deep this goes. How many people profit from chaos and disease? They'll come for you, Sterling. For all of you. Let them come, Diana said quietly. We'll be ready. As they led Cooper away, Diana felt the weight of the past 48 hours settling on her shoulders. She was exhausted, wounded, emotionally drained, but she was also, for the first time in 5 years, at peace. Commander Sterling, Patterson said, we owe you an apology, and more than that, we owe you a debt. You saved millions of lives. I had help, sir, Diana said, looking at her team. Barnes, Frost, the others who'd returned for her. About that, Patterson continued, Chief Barnes has filed a formal report taking full responsibility for abandoning his commanding officer in the field. He's prepared to accept court-martial. Diana stood despite the pain in her shoulder. Sir, with respect, Chief Barnes made a tactical decision based on the information available. When new intelligence emerged, he immediately returned to support the mission. I recommend commendation, not court-martial. Barnes stared at her. Commander, we all made mistakes, Diana continued. We all carried guilt from Syria that clouded our judgment. But when it mattered, when lives were on the line, this team came together. That's what should go in the official record. Patterson nodded slowly. I'll take that under advisement. Dr. Chen, what's the status of vaccine production? Catherine smiled. Already underway. We should have enough doses for high-risk populations within 2 weeks, general population within 2 months. The pandemic ends before it really begins. Thanks to all of you, Harrison added. This team, dysfunctional as it might have been, just prevented a global catastrophe. As the briefing concluded and people began filing out, Barnes approached Diana. Ma'am, he said quietly, about Syria, about my brother, about everything. It's done, Chief, Diana said. We move forward. I left you on that mountain in a blizzard with hostiles hunting you. And then you came back, Diana said. That's what matters. Barnes was quiet for a moment. My brother wants to meet with you. When he heard what really happened that night, what you tried to do for that child, he wants to thank you. Diana felt tears threaten for the first time in years. I'd like that. Catherine wheeled herself over. So, Commander Sterling, what's next for you? Diana looked out the window at Mount Rainier rising in the distance, its peak lost in clouds. I hear there's a new joint task force being formed. Biological threats, international cooperation. They need someone to lead it. And they asked Maffei. Will you accept? Diana turned to her team. Barnes, Frost, the others. Only if my team comes with me. All of them. Wouldn't have it any other way, ma'am, Barnes said. 3 weeks later, Diana stood at a podium in the CDC headquarters in Atlanta. The press room was packed. Reporters from around the world gathered to hear about the vaccine that had stopped a pandemic. But Diana wasn't there to talk about the vaccine. She was there to talk about truth. 5 years ago, she began, I made a decision in Syria that haunted me every day since. I chose to save my team instead of staying to help a dying child. For years, I believed that decision made me a failure as a leader and as a human being. The room was silent, cameras rolling. But I've learned something in these past weeks. Leadership isn't about making perfect decisions. It's about making necessary decisions and living with the consequences. It's about protecting your people even when they don't protect you. It's about completing the mission even when you have to do it alone. She paused, finding Catherine in the crowd. The scientist smiled encouraging. My team abandoned me on a mountain in a blizzard, Diana continued. They left me to die or fail, and honestly, I understood why. But when they learned the truth of the mission, when they understood what was at stake, they came back. Not for me, but for the mission. For the millions of lives we could save. Barnes was in the back of the room, standing at attention despite being in civilian clothes. That's what makes us who we are, Diana said. Not our successes, but how we respond to failure. Not our strength, but our willingness to protect the weak. Not our individual glory, but our collective purpose. She pulled out a small vial, holding it up to the light. This is the vaccine that Dr. Chen developed. It will save millions of lives, but it exists because a team that was broken found a way to come together. Because enemies chose to share truth instead of profit from lies. Because in the end, what unites us is stronger than what divides us. The questions came fast and fierce, but Diana answered them all with the same steady calm that had carried her through that blizzard. Later, as the crowd dispersed, she found herself alone with Catherine. You didn't mention Michael, Catherine said. My brother. That's your story to tell, if you choose, Diana replied. Catherine nodded. He would have liked you, you know. Before that last mission, he sent me a message. He said he was working with someone special. Someone who understood that duty and humanity weren't opposites, but companions. He was talking about someone else. No, Catherine said firmly. He was talking about you. I hacked his communications, Diana. I know exactly who he meant. They stood in comfortable silence, two women who'd faced death together and emerged stronger. So what now? Catherine asked. Back to the mountains. Diana smiled. Actually, I'm taking leave. First time in 5 years. Thought I might try something crazy. What's that? Rest, recovery, maybe even therapy to deal with all this unprocessed trauma. Catherine laughed. That does sound crazy for you. Frost, Diana called out. The young sergeant appeared instantly. You're in charge of team training while I'm gone. Oh, ma'am, I'm just a sergeant. Not anymore, Diana said, pulling out insignia. Barnes put you in for promotion. Congratulations, Lieutenant Anderson. Frost stared at the insignia, speechless. You came back for me, Diana said. When everyone else left, you came back. That's the kind of leadership we need. 6 months later, Diana stood on the same mountain where it had all happened. The snow had melted, revealing green meadows and wildflowers. Barnes stood beside her along with Frost and Catherine, who was walking now, her leg fully healed. Why here? Barnes asked. Diana knelt, placing a small plaque among the rocks. It read, In memory of those we couldn't save, and in honor of those who came back. Because this is where we broke, Diana said, and this is where we healed. This mountain saw us at our worst and our best. Catherine placed a hand on Diana's shoulder. The vaccine has been distributed globally. No deaths from Chimera 7 in 3 months. You did that. We did that, Diana corrected. As they walked back down the mountain, Diana thought about the past 6 months. Admiral Cooper was in federal prison, his network of conspirators dismantled. The joint task force she led had prevented 3 potential biological attacks. And her team, the one that had abandoned her, had become the most effective special operations unit in the Navy. But more than that, she'd forgiven herself for Syria. The child she couldn't save would always be with her, but now as motivation rather than condemnation. Ma'am, Frost said as they reached the trailhead, new mission just came in, possible biological weapon in Eastern Europe. Diana looked at her team, saw the readiness in their eyes, the trust rebuilt from ashes. When do we leave? Wheels up in 6 hours, Diana nodded. Then we'd better get moving. We've got lives to save. As they drove away from the mountain, Diana looked back one last time. The place where her team had said, go back to base, had become the place where she'd learned that sometimes the only way forward is through. Alone if necessary, but together when possible. That was leadership. That was honor. That was the 48 hours that had changed everything.